Pirkei Eliezer, Perek Lamed Aleph. We're holding in the middle of the Perek, talking about the last of the 10 tests of Avraham Avinu, the test of Akeidat Yitzchak. So we're holding mamish in the middle of the story, up to the words Amar Yitzchak the Avraham Aviv. Yitzchak said to his father Avraham, Avi, my father, Kashreni, tie me up. Ukshar shtei yodai, and tie my two hands, ushtei raglai, and my 2 feet, b'shvil pshiusa, because of a pshia. From a pshia, the term pshia, when we talk about, like, let's say, an avera, chatasi, avisi, pashati, so the term pshia is an avera that a person does on purpose. So Yitzchak is telling Avraham, tie my hands and my feet down so that I won't do an avera on purpose. That's what it seems to be saying. It'll come out that I'm going to defile the honor of my father. So what does that mean? So Pashtus, what that means is that Yitzchak was telling his father, tie me down so that I won't have some sort of natural reflex and end up hitting you and injuring you or something like that. If you're coming at me with a knife, I might do something to you. So tie me down so that I won't come to doing such a thing. So it says the Radal, why is that called a pshia? Really, that would be considered an onus if it's a natural reflex. So it's called an onus. He couldn't control himself. He's not dafka trying to do something against his father. So one idea the Radal says is that Machanami, we could say that Yitzchak was being hard on himself, even though it would technically be considered what we say in Einus, a complete accident in halacha. But Yitzchak would look at himself as if he did it on purpose to show how serious he's about these things. So he said, I don't want to be brought into such a situation. That's one pshat the Radal says. The other pshat, the Radal changes the girsa. Instead of pshiusa, he changes it to bishvil pshitusa. Because of pshitus. Pshitus means stretching out. And he's saying that I won't end up stretching out my limbs or something and end up hitting you or hurting you or something like that. Over here, the Medrash said that Yitzchak was worried that he might injure his father and then be mechalal the covet of his father. In other places, the Psikta, the way it brings it is that Yitzchak was worried that if he suddenly moves or something, he might actually injure himself and then passel himself from a Korban and then mess up this whole Korban over here. So that's why he told his father to tie him down. And then Targum Yonasan brings down both of these pshatim, both that he didn't want to hurt himself or he didn't want to hurt his father. And then the Radal brings another interesting pshat, which you have to know what it means exactly, but he brings from the Yalkut Machiri that it says that Yitzchak was saying you should tie me down because I don't want to end up cursing you. Right? He didn't want to end up cursing his father, so he wanted to be tied down. The question is, as the Radal points out, how does tying his hands and legs help him not end up cursing his father? You have to tie his feet. You have to gag him or something. Tying down his hands and legs is not really going to help the situation. So the Marzu brings from the Yalkut that the gears over here is instead of b'shul pshiusa, just stand the gears says shloy avoid ani b'cha, that I won't kick you, something like that. That's what Yitzchak was worried about by the Akeidah over here. Right. Kashar shtei yadav ushtei raglov. Avraham Avinu tied Yitzchak's 2 hands and his 2 feet. Va'kodoi al gabi hamizbeach. And he bound him on the Mizbeach, on top of the Mizbeach that he built. And he set up the fire and the wood, and he set up Yitzchak on top of the fire and the wood. Now, as the Radal points out, if you look in the Psukim by Akeidat Yitzchak, it doesn't say anywhere that Avraham Avinu set up a fire. It just says, the lashon of the pasuk. It said earlier in the story that he brought a fire with him, but it didn't say that he set up a fire. It says he took it with him, and they were on their merry way, right? And then it says when they got there, so it says he set up the wood. and he tied Yitzchak, he bound Yitzchak his son, and he put him on top of the Mizbeach, on top of the wood. What do we say anything about a fire in the Psukim? It doesn't say anything about a fire. So, here Pirkei Eliezer is saying a chiddush that by Akeidas Yitzchak there was a fire. The Psukim doesn't say it. Here Pirkei Eliezer is saying a chiddush that there was a fire. The Radal wants to say that Pirkei Eliezer is making this assumption based on a Pashut understanding of how Korbanos are supposed to be brought. It says in the Pasuk, at least multiple times it says this in Parshas Vayikra, it says, you put it ala eish, ala eitzim, you put the korban ala eitzim asher al ha'eish asher al mizbeach. You put it on the wood that's on the fire that's on the mizbeach. So even though the pasuk just says that there was wood, we can assume that the wood was on a fire that was on the mizbeach, because that's the normal way of doing things. You put the wood on the eish on the mizbeach. That's what the Radal wants to say. They bring down a sefer Pnini Rabbeinu Hagriz, a sefer of different stories about the Brisker Rav, on page 24 in the sefer Pnini Rabbeinu Hagriz, that says that they once asked the Brisker Rav, was there a fire on the Mizbeach by Yitzchak? So the Brisker Rav answered, yes. How do we know that? Because it's beforish in the piyut that we say in Hishanis, on Hishana Rabbah. In the last one of the Hakafis, in Hishana Rabbah, so it says, you say, Hishana Laman, Eisan and Nizrak, Balahav Eish Hishana. Right? Hashem should save us in the zchus of Eisan, Avraham Avinu, who was thrown into the fiery furnace, Hishana. Right? And then the second one says, Hishana Laman, Bein Hanekan al Eitzim Mo'esh. Hashem save us in the zchus of the sun, who is tied up upon wood and fire. So in the Hishanas we say that Yitzchak was tied up upon wood and fire. So you see there was a fire by Akeidas Yitzchak. That's the Brisker Rav's raya that there was a fire by Akeidas Yitzchak. And here we have a before Pirkei Eliezer that says it. Fine. V'nasan ragloi alav. Avraham Avinu put his foot upon Yitzchak. Kederach she'adam eisa b'shah she'shaychit es habehema kadesh le'tivat. Just like a person when he slaughters an animal, he puts his foot like on top of it to hold it down so that it won't kick him while he's slaughtering it. So too Avraham Avinu put his foot upon Yitzchak so that Yitzchak won't like kick him while he's slaughtering him. So as the Radal points out, you have to say Avraham Avinu did two things. He tied him and he also put his foot down to like hold him down. And I don't understand how to read this line, but it says V'imates es zroyoy ve'eshtei arkvois of alav. And he strengthened his arm and his two knees upon him. I'm not sure what that means. I think maybe it means that he overpowered his arm and his two knees. I don't know exactly how to read that part. Right. V'sholach es yodai. Avraham Avinu sent forth his hand. V'lokachas ha'ma'acheles. And he took the ma'acheles, the knife. Shinamar says in the pasuk, Vayishlach Avraham es yodai. Avraham Avinu sent forth his hand. V'ikachas ha'ma'acheles. And he took the knife. L'shchait es b'nai. To slaughter his son. Kohen Gadol higish is minchase v'niskay. And like a Kohen Gadol, this is the way Zayis Ranan explains it, like a Kohen Gadol, he got ready his Korban Mincha and his Nisachim. Because we know there's a halacha to go on in Menachas Taf Tzadik. Gemara says that there's no such thing as a Korban Oila without Nisachim and Mincha. Every time you bring a korban olah, meaning an animal or a bird that's being completely burnt on the mizbeach, so there's a halacha that you also have to accompany it with a korban mincha, a meal offering, and the sachim, which is like wine and oil or whatever, these type of things. So Avraham Avinu got that ready so that once he finishes with being makriv kabiyachol Yitzchak, so that he's going to get his mincha and his nesachim ready to also put on the mizbeach. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu hayayoshev v'roya la'av sha'akeid v'laben shahir nekad b'chol lev. Hakadosh Baruch Hu was sitting and he saw the father who tied down his son and the son who was tied down b'chol lev with his whole heart. Meaning that both Avraham and Yitzchak were willing participants in what's going to happen over here about Akeidas Yitzchak. Avraham Avinu was doing it b'leiv shalom and Yitzchak was doing it b'simcha and everyone was doing it b'leiv b'chol lev. And as Avraham Avinu was taking his hand to get the knife, that's a shtickle short because we said he already took the knife. But Umalachi Asharis Tzoyakim Avoichim. The ministering angels were crying out, calling out, and crying. Shenema says in the pasuk, Hein Ereilim Tzoaku Chutzo Malachi Shalom Mariv Koyun. The Malachi Shalom, the angels of peace, Mariv Koyun. They were crying they were crying bitterly. So the angels are crying as Avraham Avinu is about to go shecht Yitzchak. And the Radal explains that, first of all, the Malachi Asharis are missing out on 2 points of what's happening over here. First of all, the Malachi Asharis don't know that Hashem wasn't planning that Yitzchak should actually be shechted. So they think that this is really going to happen. So that's why they're crying. Second of all, they don't realize that Avraham and Yitzchak are doing a B'lei Shalom. They think that Avraham and Yitzchak are going through this major pain and suffering, so they're also feeling for Avraham and Yitzchak, and that's why they're crying, and they're going to try to stop it. But then the Radal says, Ayin Bira Hagra Orchaim Seif Siman Kuf Aleph, which the Bira Gra has an interesting discussion about whether angels could read people's thoughts. Also, the Stei Chemed also has a richus about this. Do angels know what people are thinking? Because we hear his pshat is that the angels didn't realize that Avraham and Yitzchak were doing a B'lei Shalom. So that's why they were crying. But is that true that they can't understand what people are thinking, or is it not true? So that's a whole arichus in the Gra and the Steicham, and other people talk about this as well. Fine. Before we go to the continuation of the story, I have this lengthy discussion over here to talk about what we just said over here, that when it says that Avram took the knife to shech his son, it says Ukikayin Gadol higishes minchasev v'niskay. Like a Kohen Gadol, he prepared the Korban mincha and then the sachim to bring after the olah. So the question that the Mefarshim are bothered by is, why does it say that Avraham Avinu was like a Kohen Gadol? What's the significance of saying he was like a Kohen Gadol? Yeah, you guys hear the question? In what way is Avraham Avinu like a Kohen Gadol? We've said before the idea, I think it was in Perek Ches, we spoke about the idea that Avraham Avinu had the din of a Kohen, and I think I said there that I have a whole discussion about it, that Avraham Avinu was the din of a Kohen Gadol. But what's the significance of saying Avraham Avinu was like a Kohen Gadol? So the Zayis Ranan talks about this. The Zayis Ranan on the Yalkut Shemoini over here by this medrash. So the Zayis Ranan says like this. He asks a kasha, a halachic kasha. The halacha is that an oinon is not allowed to be makriv a korban. If a kohen, Loyaleno, has a close relative who died, so he has a halachic status of an oinon. An oinon is somebody it's a type of mourning where a person is pater from mitzvahs daraisa. That's a halacha of an oinon. So the halacha is that a kohen who's an oinon is not allowed to bring korbanos. So it's asur for him to bring korbanos. The din of an oinon. So the question is, the Zayis Ranan asks, how could it be that Hashem is telling Avraham Avinu to bring Yitzchak as a korban, but the second that he's going to shecht Yitzchak, then Yitzchak's going to be dead, and then Avraham Avinu is going to be an oinon, and then he won't be able to be makriv the korban because he can't do avodah because the oinon is pasal avodah. Right? So the answer is that Avraham Avinu had a din of a Kohen Gadol. That's the Zayis Ranan says. That's the significance of saying that Avraham Avinu had a din of a Kohen Gadol. Because the halacha is that a Kohen, even though a regular Kohen, if he's Onan, he can't bring a Korban, but a Kohen Gadol, when he's Onan, he still brings the Korban. We learned that out from Psukim and Parsha Shmini, that after the death of Nadav and Avihu, so they were still supposed to eat the korban, even though they were the Aaron and his two remaining sons were called Onanim, but they were still supposed to eat the korban because an Onan is allowed to do avodah when he's a Kohen Gadol. An Onan is allowed to do avodah even though he's an Onan. That's the word of the Zayis Ranan. So what's the significance that Avraham Avinu was a Kohen Gadol? Says the Zayis Ranan, the significance is to tell you that even though after he shechts Yitzchak he's going to be an Onan, he'll still be able to be makriv him because he's a Kohen Gadol. Yeah? Fine. There's a similar vart that's brought down in the name of the Rebbe of Heschel. And I have this sefer over here called Mishnah's Rebbe Eliezer, from Rebbe Eliezer Trillinger, who was a Talmud of the Rebbe Reb Heschel. So it's also brought down the Chanukah Soter, the sefer of Rebbe Heschel, but this is like the source of it. This goes back to a pasuk that we spoke about last week. It says in the pasuk, "Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham Aviv, Vayomer Avi." Yitzchak said to his father Avram, and he said to him, Avi, my father. Next pasuk. Vayomer Yitzchak Avram. What's the next pasuk says? What's the lashon exactly? Vayomer Yitzchak el Avi, Vayomer Avi, Vayomer Hineni Vini. And he said, here, I'm here. Vayomer. He said, and Yitzchak said to him, Hinei ha'esh va'etzim. Here, behold, is the fire and the wood. Vayeh haseh la'olah. Where is the seh for the olah? So the question is like this. First, Yitzchak says to his father, my father. And then he says to him, here's the wood and the fire. Where's the seh for the olah? Right? What was the first pasuk? The first pasuk is completely superfluous. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avram Aviv, Vayomer Avi. Yitzchak said to his father Avram, my father. Well, it doesn't say, you didn't tell us anything. You just said, my father. And then it says, what's the shaykhs between the two? Says the Rebbe of Heschel that it has to be that when Yitzchak said Avi, that was part of his question. When he said Avi, that was part of his question of where is the sed that you're gonna bring as the oila. Meaning, he says like this. Avi means my father. Yitzchak was saying to his father, Avi, you're my father. So if you shecht me, so then you're going to be an Onan and you won't be able to be makriv me. So it can't be that I'm the Korban, and I know that you're making a Korban because hinei ha'esh va'etzim, you have a fire and you have wood. I know you're bringing a Korban, so ayeh haseh la'ayla. Where is the lamb that you're going to sacrifice as the oila? It can't be me because you're my father. So where is it? That's what the Rebbe Reb Heschel says. So that's sort of the kasha of the Zayis Ranan, right? The Zayis Ranan asked, how could it be that he would be able to be makriv him after he slaughtered him, he'd be an Onan? The Zayis Ranan answers to that, Avraham Avinu had a din of a Kohen Gadol, so he could be makriv when he's an Onan. But this is the way the Rebbe Heschel sets it up, that Yitzchak was asking this about Avraham Avinu, and is saying, where's the set? And then basically the way he explains Avraham Avinu's answer, the Rebbe Reb Heschel, the answer is Echanami, Gzer Sekosov. Al Pi Dibur, there's a special nevuah. Hashem said, I have to be makriv you. So even though usually when you shecht your son, when a person's child is killed, so then he becomes an onan and he can't be makriv other karbanas. But here is a special exception. Al Pi nevuah, Hayra Shah, Hashem said to do it, so I'm allowed to do it. That's what the Rebbe Reb Heschel says. So according to the Rebbe Reb Heschel, there's no reason that we have to say that Avraham Avinu had a din of a Kohen Gadol. We can answer the Zayis Ranan's kasha by saying that Avraham Avinu, not that he was a Kohen Gadol, but there was Gzer Sekosov, that he's allowed to be makriv even though he's an Onan. That's one nukuda. The other nukuda is like this. The Radal has a few questions that he asks on the Zayis Ranan. He says, first of all, the halacha is that the Gemara in Zvachim Daf Tazayin says that an Onan by a bama is mutter. We have said a halacha before that when a person's close relative dies, he's not allowed to officiate in the Avodas HaMikdash. So the Gemara in Zvachim has a tzad to say that by a bama, by a private altar, the person is allowed to officiate. You are allowed to be makriv karbanos on a bama. It's only din in the Beis HaMikdash you're not allowed to be. So the Radal says, so if that's true, so you have another answer. You could say that Avraham Avinu was able to be makriv him after he shechted him because it wasn't the Beis HaMikdash, it was a bama. That's one kasha the Radal asks. I don't think it's such a kasha because you could argue that since we're talking about over here on Har Moriah, which is the makam of the Beis HaMikdash, so then you could say that it doesn't have a halachic status of a bama. But the Radal seems to understand that it does have a halachic status of a bama. The Radal says another point. This is there's a halacha in Mesechus Sanhedrin on Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis. The Gemara says that ein krevin misablim aleichem shenei rogin b'din Torah. Of a person, let's say a person lo yaleinu does a horrible avera that he's chayav misa for. Yeah, he was Mechalel Shabbos with Edom and Hasra. Right, he was Mechalel Shabbos with Edom and Hasra, and so he's put to death by Beis Din. Yeah, so the guy is put to death by Beis Din. Now, do his relatives have to sit shiva because let's say their relative was killed or died? Do they have to sit shiva or not? So the Gemara says, Halacha and Sanhedrin, the Gemara says that no, they don't sit shiva. There's no avelus on somebody who was killed rightfully according to the halachas of Beis Din. Why? Because he did whatever. I don't know exactly the Havana, but probably because he deserves to die. Because that's not necessarily a sad event. The Vera was the sad event, not the death. Maybe something like that. I don't know exactly. But the Radal says that if that's true, so then there should be the same halacha by aninus. You're not going to be considered an Onan if a person dies al pi Hashem. If Hashem said you should kill, if Hashem told Avraham Avinu you should shecht Yitzchak, right? So that's not going to make him a din of an Onan because Hashem said he should die. So therefore, it's not an avelus. There's no reason to be an Onan. That's another point that the Radal says. So according to that, you have another answer. How is Avraham Avinu going to be makriv of him after he shechted him, even if he's not a Kohen Gadol? You could say that a person who dies al pi Hashem, there's no din aninus. That's one nukuda that the Radal says. Then the Radal brings a raya to the Zayis Ranan's Yisai. The Radal brings a raya from the Rikanti. We mentioned last week already that the Rikanti says, and other later Sfarim say this as well, the Rikanti says that Akeidah Yitzchak happened in Yom Kippur. Yeah? So now the halacha is that all the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur, Pashtus, we'll see exactly in a minute, but all the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur has to be done by the Kohen Gadol. So the question is, if Akeidah Yitzchak was on Yom Kippur, so how can Avraham Avinu do the avodah? He's not a Kohen Gadol. So the answer is, he was a Kohen Gadol. That's the Radal, even though we just said before that he asked two kashas on the Zayis Ranan, here he sort of goes in a different direction and he brings the raya to the Zayis Ranan, Avraham Avinu that didn't Kohen Gadol, because Akeidah Yitzchak happened in Yom Kippur and the Vayda is kosher only with the Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippur. But that's the Radal's, that's the discussion of the Radal. I spoke once a whole arichos about this, if Avraham Avinu didn't Kohen Gadol by my siyum a few years back on Mesachas Chulin. But I'll just say over one or two nukudas that have to do with this. I saw kasha once like this. I saw this in the sefer called Kovetz Iyun Parsha. It said it brought down the following kasha. It says, okay, let's say it like this. There's a halacha that in order for food to become susceptible to ritual impurity, to be mekabel tumah, so the halacha is that the food has to touch liquid. That's the lashon of pasuk in Parsha Shmini. So that tells us that only if mayim or liquid touches a food, then it can become tamei, tumas oichlin. But if a liquid doesn't touch the food, it can't become tamei, tumas oichlin. That's halacha d'oraisa. Now, what is considered a liquid in regard to this halacha of rendering a food susceptible to tumah? So the Mishnah Mesachas Machshirin says that there's 7 liquids that render a food susceptible to tumah. Now, I once saw this in a Chassidish sefer many years ago. It's a very gishmak trick, how to remember what the 7 liquids are. And basically, he says that the 7 liquids are connected to the 7 Yomim Tovim of the year. So I'll say it over in that way, so it's easier to remember. I'll say it like this: Rosh Hashanah is honey. Yom Kippur is dew, because whatever we'll see, dew has to do with Tchias HaMeisim, and Yom Kippur is like a din of Tchiasim. Whatever, we'll talk about that at a different time. Sukkot is water. Chanukah is oil. Purim is wine, Pesach is blood, and Shavuos is milk. So those are the 7 liquids that render food susceptible to tumah. Right? So we said that blood is one of the 7 liquids that renders food susceptible to tumah. Now, the Gemara in Mesachas Chulin says that blood of a korban that falls on food, that doesn't make the food susceptible to tumah. It's not Mekabel Tumah if blood from a korban falls on it. Right? Why? Because the reason why blood is it allows a food to become Mekabel Tumah is because blood is like water. Why? Because it says about blood, don't eat blood, rather pour it on the floor like water. So blood that's poured on the floor like water, so that that is like water. That type of blood is like water, so therefore it allows food to become Mekabel Tumah. But blood that's not poured on the floor like water, for example, blood of a korban, which you don't pour the blood on the floor like water, rather you take the blood and you use it for the Avodas HaKorbanos, so you do the Zrika, or whatever other things they do with the blood, Kabbalah, Zrika, etc. So that type of blood doesn't rest because it's not like mayim. Yeah, that's a Gemara Chulun. So the question is like this: if that's true, blood. Okay, so we're saying a halacha that blood that is of a korban is not like mayim and is therefore does not allow something to become tamei. Doesn't allow food to become tamei. Fine, that's the yisod. Yeah. So the kasha that I saw in Yuna Parasha is like this. We say in the piyut on, I'm very into my piyutim today, I don't know. We say in the piyut on Shmini Atzeres, in Tfilas Geshem, or Simchas Torah here in Eretz Yisrael, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, the same day. Right? So we say that Hashem should give us water in the zchus of different people. Right? So when we talk about Yitzchak, we say that Hashem should give us water in the zchus of Yitzchak. So we say, the lashon of the piyut is, V'sachta l'hayroi l'shachtoi l'ishbech tomei kamayim. Right? Zechor hanoilad v'v'surah sikach nomat mayim. Right? V'sachta l'hayroi l'shachtoi l'ishbech tomei kamayim. Hashem should remember the one who was born with the news of Yukach Nomat Mayim, which has to do with the story of the three angels visiting Avraham Avinu's parents. So Yitzchak Avinu's parents, right? So we're conjuring the zchus of Yitzchak Avinu, the Sachta l'hayroi, and you spoke to his parent, to shacht him, lishberch domei kamayim, to spill his blood like water. That's what it says in the pasuk, in the piyut. Sorry, right? So the kasha is like this. It says in the piyut that Hashem commanded Avraham Avinu to slaughter Yitzchak, to spill his blood like water. Wait a second. We just said before that blood of a korban is not considered spilled like water because you need the blood for the korban, for the avodah of the korban. So how can the piyut say that Hashem commanded Avram to slaughter Yitzchak to spill his blood like water? Yitzchak was a korban. A korban, the blood is not spilled like water. The korban, the blood is used. You hear the kasha?
It's compared to the other blood.
Huh?
It's compared to the other blood.
Yeah, it sounds like it's compared to the other blood. The type of blood that does render things Kabul Tumah.
We don't darshan
like the Gemara? That's very difficult to say. So I wanted to say an even bigger chiddush though. I wanted to say that yes, you are right. Hashem commanded Avraham Avinu to slaughter Yitzchak and to spill his blood like water. In what way? I want to say that it could be that, or at least the author of this piyut understood that Hashem was telling Avraham Avinu, just shechten. Just shechten v'zeh. Anything beyond shechten you can't do because you're an onan. That's how I want to answer the Zayas Rana's kasha. Now he's asking, how can Avraham Avinu do anything after the shechita? If Yitzchak is dead, so then he's an onan, so he can't do avoid the korbanos. So I'm saying, yes, that's true. That's why Hashem only said shechten. He didn't say do anything after that. And that's why the piyut is saying that it's like spilling his blood like water. Because, yeah, it's going to be like water. It's just shechtim, the blood's going to go on the floor. You don't need to use the blood for anything else, and then it's all good.
Just thinking of something. When, in the best Mikdash, when did they come in shechtim the animals?
When did they shecht it?
Where?
Where? In Nazar.
Yeah. Outside, not in the Mizbeach.
Yeah.
Yitzchak was being shechted.
On the Mizbeach. I hear.
So don't have to make Korah. He was already
there, you're saying.
Already there.
That's a very interesting idea. You're answering the question in another way.
Yeah.
You're saying that Avraham Avinu set it up that the second he's already shechted, so he's already on the fire, and then he won't have to do anything else. What about the blood?
Yeah,
there's a halacha that you have to take the blood and put the blood on the karnes and mizbeach, etc.
Yeah, but it says about the Kohen Edios that he doesn't have to do it. Sorry, that it's not allowed to do it because it's talking about the Korban. It's not talking about the spilling of blood.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. So it's a good mahalach. We have to think about how to exactly use that to answer the question completely. This is the chiddush that I wanted to say. That
in a way, it simplifies a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like you're seeing like the Korban in a different way.
Right.
It's not using the same halachas. That what the Chachamim were trying to say. They're trying to take all the halachas of the basic mikdash, how to shepherd an animal, how to carve an animal, how to spill the blood, and translate into whatever Avraham Avinu did.
Right.
What we're doing here is the opposite.
We're saying this is a completely new thing, a different idea.
It did something that Hashem was, telling him to do, the way Hashem was telling him to do.
Right.
Nothing to do with the halachas that we're gonna, further on, no.
I heard. I say, have you guys ever heard of Rav Fol Shmulevitz? It's called. You heard of Rav Fol Shmulevitz? Was a yeshiva in the Mir Yeshiva. He was nifter about a little bit over a month ago. His shleishim was on Tuesday. One of the big Talmidei Chachamim, Baal Midas, is mamish like a paragon of Midas and Torah of Midas Tevis and everything. He's one of the editors of Encyclopedia Talmudus, or Shiva in the Mir. He used to be a Rebbe in Hebron before he came to the Mir. His father was Shiva in the Mir, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Big Talmud Chacham. He was nifter about a few weeks ago. So I spoke to him a few times in my life. I once had the story with him was that it's a very shtickle sad story. He had ALS, which basically meant that like his body like slowly just like stopped working each part of his body, and then he was eventually nifter. But the interesting thing was that after he started getting sick, so he went to America and they did like an experimental treatment on him, and an experimental treatment worked and it reversed the symptoms of ALS. And this was the first time in the history that the doctors were able to reverse the symptoms of ALS. Like he wasn't able to walk, and then he went to America, he had this treatment, and he was able to walk afterwards. It was like mamish amazing. And he went on TV and he was like helping spread awareness. Now they have like, it's a famous thing in America now, that there's an ice bucket challenge. They're trying to spread awareness about ALS. You make a challenge that either you're going to pour a bucket of ice on top of yourself, or you give $10,000 to some charity organization about ALS. But Rafal was very involved in trying to, at that point when he was getting better from it. And then afterwards, the symptoms started getting worse again, and they weren't able to replicate the treatment or something, and eventually it was nifter. But so when it was Simchas Torah, Tavshin Ayin Beis, it was the first time Rafal was starting to get schwacher. So I was in yeshiva on Simchas Torah, and I guess he wasn't feeling so. We didn't know exactly what was happening at that point. This was before he was nifter even. So Rafal was like, everyone was dancing, and he was sort of sitting on the side over there. So I figured, this is a good opportunity. I'll go sit down next to him and shmooze with him. So I went there, I sit next to Rafal, and I told him this whole shtickle Torah over there that I told you guys. With the Radal and the Zayis Rana and my vort to answer up the kasha of the Kavitz Yuna Parsha that Hashem only commanded him to shecht him and not to continue. I didn't say over the Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer because I didn't have that sefer. I didn't know about it then, but instead over the shtickle Torah. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but I think the way I left it off was with the Radal. The Radal brought a raya. Like obviously you understand the connection because we're talking about it was on Simchas Torah, so I was bringing in the piyut in Simchas Torah. It wasn't stam coming from that field. But anyways, so the last thing we left off was with the Radal brought a raya to the Zayis Ranam, because the Radal said that he brought the Rekanti, that the Rekanti said that the Akeidah Yitzchak happened on Yom Kippur, and since Avodah is only kosher on Yom Kippur with a Kohen Gadol, so it must be that Avraham Avinu did Kohen Gadol. That's what the Radal said. So we were discussing that raya, is that a raya or not? So we will fall off the top of his head. But then a Ritva in Mesachas Yuma Daf Yud Beis and Beis, that the Ritva says When we say that all the avodas in Yom Kippur are only kosher with the Kohen Gadol, it's not necessarily true exactly the way I just said it. Because he says there's a difference, the Ritva says there's a difference between avodas that have to do with Yom Kippur and avodas that have to do with every day of the year. So, for example, every day of the year, you bring a Korban Tamid. Right? So if you bring a Korban Tamid every day of the year, so when you do the Tamid and Yom Kippur, it's not necessarily true that only the Kohen Gadol has to do the Tamid and Yom Kippur. That's what the Ritva says. So if you understand like the Ritva, you can answer the Zayis Ranan's kasha differently. You could say that Avraham Avinu was able to do the Korban of Akeidat Yitzchak even if it's on Yom Kippur, would be because Akeidat Yitzchak wasn't something that intrinsically has to do with Yom Kippur. It was a special Korban that Hashem said to bring. It happened to be that the day that He wanted you to bring it was Yom Kippur, but it didn't have to do specifically with Yom Kippur itself. That's what Rav Fosh Shlavitz said to me. And then I said that that's not so pashut itself. The Rambam in Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim in Parak Aleph understands every single avodah that's done in the Beis Mikdash has to be done by the Kohen Gadol. Even the Korban Tamid, even whatever, that's the only Korban that's going to be done that doesn't have to do necessarily with the Seder of the Korbanos of Yom Kippur, but that also has to be done dafka with the Kohen Gadol. So according to that, you have the Radal's Raya to the Zayis Ranan. Fine. Continuing the story. Amru Malach. So we said that Avraham Avinu had Yitzchak up there, and he's holding the knife, and he's about to go and slaughter him. Amru Malach Yeshares. The ministering angels said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Nikreisla Rachum v'Chanun. You are called Rachum, merciful, v'Chanun, and gracious. Shirachamecha al kol ma'asecha, because your mercy is upon all of your creations. So the angel said to Hashem, Rachem al Yitzchak, you should have mercy on Yitzchak. Shehu Adam, because he's a person. Uven Adam, and the son of the person, which the Radal understands means we're saying also have Rachmanas on Avraham Avinu, that he shouldn't have to kill his son. The way the Yalkut Shimoni brings on this manuscript, you read it a little bit differently. It says, V'rachem al Yitzchak Shehu Adam, you should have Rachmanas on Yitzchak, who is a person. Uven Adam Neka Lefanecha Kebehema, and a person is being tied down in front of you, Hashem, like an animal, like a regular kind of animal. You can let that happen to a person? Adam Evehema Taishia Hashem. Adam and a man and animal Hashem will save. Shinema, as it says in the pasuk, Tzidkascha Kahare El, your righteousness is like a great mountain. Mishpatecha Tehoim Rabba, your justice is very deep. Adam Evehema Taishia Hashem. Adam, man and animal, Hashem saves. So Hashem saves everyone. He makes a cheshbon and then figures out how to save people. Just stam agav. One of my rabbim does this also. Whenever he's learning something and it brings out a pasuk and he has some muster to say about that pasuk, so he says it over. This pasuk, we say this pasuk on Shabbos afternoon by mincha. There's two things that people say wrong about this pasuk when they read this pasuk in Shabbos afternoon mincha. First of all, they read it in a way that it's borderline heretical. They read it as Adam Avahema Teshia Hashem. Man and animals will save Hashem, which is borderline heretical. You have to read it as Adam Avahema Teshia Hashem. Man and animals, you save Hashem. That's how you read it. The animals and the man are not saving Hashem. Hashem saves the animals and the man. What? No, but the way people read it is they say, Adam Avaymateshia Hashem. That means Adam Avayma saves Hashem. What? Yeah. The other nakuda is that I was saying this wrong the whole time because I want to bring out this point. The word is not Taishia. The word is actually Soishia. If you look in a real Tanakh, in a regular Tanakh or good Tehillim, it always says Soishia Hashem without a dot in the saf.
How does it come out if you say by in the middle?
Tehillim Parak Lamed Vav Pasuk Zayin. You look in the Tanakh, it says Soishiach Hashem. Everyone says Toishiach Hashem. I don't know why. All the Siddurim, it prints it with a dot in the top, even though in all the Tanakhs it prints it without a dot in the top. So if anyone knows the answer to this, it'll be very interesting to know why people do it like that. Okay, let's go back there. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kevan Shegia Hacharev Al Tzavaroi. Once the knife came to the neck of Yitzchak Avinu, Parcha v'yatzah nishmas shel Yitzchak. His soul, or the soul of Yitzchak, flew away and it left his body. Once the knife got to his neck, the lashon of Medrash was the sword. Well, wait a second. We're talking about a knife. Why does it say sword? So the Radal, okay, that's an interesting question. I don't have a good answer, but the Radal says an answer. The Radal says that it's alluding to another Gemara in Brachos. What? Yeah, the Pasuk says macheles. A macheles, I don't know exactly. The word for sword, usually, the word for knife usually is sakin. Right? I'm not sure if the word sakin appears anywhere in Tanakh. I would have to research that. But the word macheles is usually the word in Tanakh for knives, because macheles means like something that it would literally mean like something, an object that prepares food for being eaten, which you'd say is a knife. That's how you would super literally translate the word macheles. But here it doesn't say the word macheles or sakin. It says a sword. Why is it a sword? Avraham Avinu is not taking a sword and chopping off his son's head. That's not what's happening over here. He's taking a knife. That's not there's a difference between a sword and a knife, right? So the Radal says that it's alluding to a Gemara in Brachos Daf Yud. The Gemara, it's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says, "Afilu charav chada munach al tzavoroi al yimna atzvei min rachamim." I think Avram Fried made a song about this. Afilu charav chada, even a sharp sword munach al tzavoroi is resting upon one's neck. Al yimna atzvei shel adam, of a person. Al yimna atzvei min rachamim. He shouldn't withhold himself back from asking Hashem for mercy. Even if there's a sword mamish on a person who's in the worst situation, the most dire straits, he should never give up. Right? What do the rest of us say? Altis Yaesh. Right? A person shouldn't give up from Rachamim, and you should always be able to ask Hashem to help you, and you can be saved. You don't have to give up. So the lashon of the Gemara over there is if there's a sword on your neck. So the Radal says that Pirkei Lezer specifically chose the word sword over here, even though we're talking about a knife, to allude to that Gemara. That's an interesting idea. Kevin Shehishmiya Koiloi. So we said that Yitzchak's neshama left him and flew out or whatever, right? So the question is, why did Yitzchak's neshama leave him? What happened? So the Pirush Harakech al Torah over there, I guess in Parshas Vayera, says that the reason why his soul left him is because he was scared, which in modern day terms would say he had a heart attack or something like that. He was very scared and he just shut down. Then later on, the Rakech brings a different pshat. The Kubalim go with this pshat more generally. Is that when Yitzchak was over there by the Akeidah Yitzchak, so something opened up in Shemayim, and Yitzchak was able to see certain things in Shemayim that a human being is normally unable to see, and because he saw that, because he saw that, he saw the Shechina, and that's why he died. So there's two ideas over here. I guess the Pasha Pshat is that he was scared, and the other Pshat is that he saw some heavenly things or whatever, and then his neshama went out. And I think we spoke about this before. It actually happens to be this sefer is the one that talks about this. Why is it that if a person sees the Shechina, he dies? When did we speak about this? I don't remember where we spoke about this. Maybe in Parak Mem something last year before Shavuos. I think it was last year before Shavuos. In Parak Mem Aleph. Is it because it's an oynish that you're not supposed to see certain things? Lo yirani adam v'chai means you're not supposed to look at certain things, and if you look at it, you get punished, that you get killed? Or is it a metzius? The way the Rabbi Heschel explains it is that That's a medrash, I think. The medrash says that, like a mashal, like if you have a baby calf, and the baby calf is walking along the street, and what does it see? It sees its mommy. What does it do? It runs over to its mommy, right? So too the neshama. The neshama is a part of Hashem. The chelik it's a part of Hashem. So when the neshama sees some part of the Shekhinah or some part of Hashem that otherwise it doesn't see, so the neshama says, "Mommy," and it jumps out and wants to go closer to Hashem, and then mimela the person dies. Those are two explanations of why if a person sees a Shekhinah, he ends up dying.
Can you explain like that by the sense of difference?
Yeah, I think that was the context that we were discussing it in last year. By the source of Dibrus.
The first two, so.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how it went, but once Hashem allowed His voice to be heard from between the two kruvim, which the Radal someone takes that as an expression. I think the Razu says it. It's more of an expression because there are no kruvim that Hashem's voice should come out of yet. But we say that Hashem's voice comes out from the kruvim. So like when Hashem's voice came out and said, "V'amar," it said, "Al tishlach yadcha el anar," don't send forth your hand upon the lad. So what happened when Hashem called out, "Al tishlach yadcha el anar"? Chazra hanefesh legufay. The nefesh of Yitzchak's soul came back to his body. And Avraham Avinu untied him, and Yitzchak was able to stand on his feet, and everything was hunky dory, right?
The Malachim were shouting and screaming to Hashem, and also boiching.
What?
Very funny. It said the Malachim was they were screaming to Hashem.
Yeah.
And those Malachim, between those Malachim, I don't know what kind of Malachim they were the Kruvim. And later on, we got the Kruvim.
Yeah,
for the,
I hear. It's an idea. I have to develop it exactly. I'm not sure exactly.
I'm talking about the kruvim that Hashem used to speak.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. These kruvim represent those malachim. You want to say something like that. The point is that Hashem said, "Al tishlach yadcha el anar," and the neshama of Yitzchak that left him came back into his body. V'amad al raglav, and he stood upon. Avraham Avinu untied him from the mizbech, and he was able to get up, and he stood on his feet. And the Radal says the significance of this is that every time we find like first of all, in Perek Aleph, when we talk about the Hashem creating Adam Rishon, so it says that the Shah Revi'is, Hashem was zarka by neshama. Hashem threw neshama into Adam Rishon's body, v'amad raglav, and then he stood on his feet. So you see that the getting the neshama is not necessarily the completion of the person. It's you get a neshama and then you stand on your feet, which is interesting because little children, when they're first born, they have we would say that they have a neshama, but they can't stand on their feet. I don't know what the significance of that is, but we see over there in Perek Aleph that Adam Rishon was created. And the first thing was Hashem gave him a neshama and he stood on his feet. So the Radal says that every time we think about Akeidas HaMeisim, by Elisha in Melachim Beis, and by Yechezkel, in Perek Lamed Zayin in Yechezkel, in all these places we find Akeidas HaMeisim, and it says, and they came back to life, and they stood on their feet. So here too by Yitzchak it says he came back to life, and he stood on his feet. Yeah, what were you going to ask?
No, I think it's a simple answer to that question. A baby's created a baby without an incomplete body. Like, what's incomplete? It's complete, but it's not able to do things. Not yet. And Avraham was created complete, like a man.
He was
a man. His body.
No, but what I'm saying is that. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that in a chanami, a person who's born is not complete yet.
It's not only complete. It's like the body's not able to. The body needs it. It's time to get.
Yeah. So the truth is that this parak we're going to finish off the 10 tests of Avraham Avinu. Next parak is going to talk about Yitzchak, and then the next two program afterwards are all about Akeidas HaMeisim. So like it goes off on a tangent from over here about we're talking about Akeidas HaMeisim. The parak Lamed Gimel and Lamed Dalet are all about Akeidas HaMeisim and all different things about Akeidas HaMeisim. So hopefully we'll get to see all kinds of interesting things that have to do with Akeidas HaMeisim. Okay, let's go back there. V'ra'a Yitzchak Akeidas HaMeisim in the Torah. From this, Yitzchak Avinu saw that Tchias HaMeisim is true from the Torah. And Marzu asks, what do you mean from the Torah? What do you see that he sees it? You don't see it from the Torah, you see that Tchias HaMeisim is an actual concept. Where do you see that's min of Torah? Not sure exactly what that means. The other Mefarshim bring down, there's a different girsa, that it's V'yada Yitzchak shekol HaMeisim asidim l'chayos. Yitzchak knew, from here he saw that just like he died and came back to life, so everyone else who dies is going to come back to life. He understood the idea of Tchias HaMeisim. The Bayis HaGadol says that this has to do with Ma'is Avos Sivan Abanim. That Yitzchak was reasoning that if I'm one of the Avos and I died and came back to life, so my descendants, even when they're going to die, they're also going to come back to life. Ma'is Avos Sivan Abanim. Ba'is Shah Pasach v'Amar. At that moment, Yitzchak Avinu opened his mouth and he said, Baruch Ato Hashem Mechayeh HaMeisim. Blessed art thou Hashem Mechayeh HaMeisim, the one who brings to life those who are dead. So if we're following, we had in Perek Chav Vav, in the end of Perek Chav Vav, we said that Avraham Avinu said, Baruch Ato Hashem Mogen Avraham. In the end of Perek Chav Zayin. In the end of Perek Chav Zayin, Avraham Avinu said, Baruch Ato Hashem Mogen Avraham. In the end, now here in Perek Lamed Aleph, we're saying that Yitzchak said Mechayeh HaMeisim. So if we think about it, that we see that the first brachas in Shemana Esrei, the first one is Keneged Avram, because Mogen Avram, it's like explicit over there. The second one is Mechayeh HaMeisim, which is Keneged Yitzchak, because Yitzchak died and came back to life, and we see that Yitzchak was the one who was Mesaken it. The Radal brings another interesting idea over here from the Shibali Aleket and the Sefer Tanya Rabasi from the Italian Rishonim. They bring down a medrash that says that when Yitzchak was put al gabe hamizbeach, so he became ashes, and his ashes were somehow miraculously thrown over Har HaMoriah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gathered the ashes and put on it tal chermain, a dew that would bring him back to life. And then from that, we said before, the dew has to do with bringing back to life. Tal atchiyah, that's why we daven for Morid Atal in the bracha of Mechayeh HaMeisim. Right? And then Yitzchak Avinu came back to life, and the Malach Shares said about this, Baruch Ato Hashem Mechayeh HaMeisim. So in the medrash that they bring down, that the Ratal brings down from these people, it says not that Yitzchak said Mechayeh HaMeisim, but that these angels said Mechayeh HaMeisim.
How long did it take?
What? It seems from the continuation, it seems like this happened like mamish, like on the spur, like mamish on the moment.
I heard one medrash once. I can't remember where.
What, that he was in Gan Eden for 2 years?
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, we'll speak about that Be'ezus Hashem in the next part. But the other Nakuda was that okay, so he said the Radal also wants to say that according to this medrash, Yitzchak was burnt because we're talking about ashes of Yitzchak, etc. And he says that in Chazal we talk about the ashes of Yitzchak in a few different places. The Chazal discuss the ashes of Yitzchak, which is a concept that has to do with Hashem remembering Akeidah Yitzchak. And the Radal wants to say that it could be those places. It's lav dafka. It doesn't literally mean the ashes of Yitzchak. Rather, it means the ashes of the ram that Avraham Avinu brought instead of being Makriv Yitzchak, which Be'ezer Hashem we will learn about in the continuation of the parak next week. Okay. Any questions?
According to the second medrash that Radal brings,
Yeah.
was the, also the moment that the Yitzchak Avinu did his neshama left his body. Did you check it? There's also this moment that the neshama left the body before he was shafted.
That I'm not sure. I don't know if we have those midrashim. All right, let's look.
Maybe I asked you last week.
What?